Hey everybody, it's Ricky from Ricky's Historical Tidbits podcast. In this video, it's not a podcast, we're going to be doing something different. So I want to take you along with me as I do some research. Right now I'm working on a podcast about Joaquin Murrieta. If you've never heard of him, basically he was a bandit and he killed a bunch of people, and he's been made into a Robin Hood, basically, a Robin Hood of Mexico. And in the 70s, he was like a figurehead of the Chicano movement. And it's very interesting. The whole idea of this man has taken on legend rather than what actually was, So I've already done the majority of my research. And I've already read all kinds of articles, which for the most part, when you're doing history research, unfortunately, the majority of articles are basically the same. It's just the same thing rehashed in similar language, or sometimes it's just the same exact thing copy and pasted. There's articles that I've read that are essentially copied and pasted from Wikipedia or vice versa, But the interesting thing is that there's two stories of Joaquin Murrieta: the truth and the fiction story written by John Rollin Ridge. So there's a book called The Life and Adventures of Joaquin Murrieta, the Celebrated California Bandit, and it's by Yellowbird, which that's the native name of John Rollin Ridge. And this book was then translated into other languages, and in particular Chilean, and they changed his ethnicity entirely to Chilean instead of Mexican, since he was born in Sonora. And he became kind of like a figurehead of like anti-colonialism for the Mexican people. And he was a figurehead in the Chicano movement of the 70s. But it's all based kind of on this book by John Rollin Ridge. But it's a fiction story. It's not real. The truth is pretty simple. And it's somewhat documented. And the truth, if you actually look into it, for example, there's an article by I think his name is William Merrow. I think it's from the Contra Costa Historical Society, and I really like his work. He's a really good researcher. He explains that Bancroft, which you may have heard of, he was a historian. He used this particular book as a primary source when he did his research about Joaquin Murrieta. And because of that, and because of his name and his standing, that solidified this as the true story, like a biography, rather than a fiction, historical fiction type novel, which is what it is. It's interesting. It's a great story. At least I think so. I haven't read it yet. I have it on my Kindle. It's a great story. I don't know. I think it's a great story. I've heard great things. There's all kinds of people that actually have read it said it's a great story. From what I've read, it's a great story. Anyway. But anyway, I wanted to take you along with me as I do some research in the newspapers, especially. So let's get on to it. Okay, so we'll be jumping around here a little bit, but basically what I use newspapers.com by Ancestry. And first we go into the keyword section here, Joaquin Murrieta, date 1850 to 1865, California. So we'll see what we find. Okay, so looks like, okay, so there's nothing. Okay, cool. So there's this one thing in Clamor Publico. It's in Spanish. I don't know how to read Spanish, so we got to go back out here and try something else. Okay. It's interesting. Let's try Joaquin Bandit. Okay. Here we go. The Placer Herald. The bandit Joaquin has last movements. The Republican says our Monterey correspondent has conversed with the author of Joaquin's confession, which appeared originally in the San Francisco Herald and was copied into the Republican. He says there is no doubt that Joaquin passed south through Monterey County and probably took the road for Loreto in Lower California. The real name of the bandit is Joaquin Mulitani. Not sure what that says. Mulati. He speaks English fluently, and his foraging expeditions has always a fresh horse at hand. He was heard to say that he would never kill a Spaniard. About 10 days ago, he was seen at St. Louis Obispo. Another gentleman who is likely to be acquainted with the facts says Joaquin is now on his way to Lower California and will keep along the shore off the Gulf to the missions of St. Catherine and San Pedro, thence to San Francisco, Borgia, or to the mission of Santa Gertrude through a barren mountainous country. The conversation reported to the Herald between Joaquin and the ranchero is confirmed. He, however, said much more than was reported. He is ultimately acquainted with the country and has always with him a band of some 15 men. The notorious cutthroat certainly has a charmed life. Okay, so there we go. That's something. What else can we find here? Let's see here. That's the same exact thing. That's the same exact thing, but okay. All right, San Andreas Independent. Let's see what this has to say. So he's mentioned way back down there, but what's the top? The San Andreas is the title here. Okay. All places have a beginning, and so had the village of San Andreas. In the winter of 1848, a few Mexicans encamped at the forks of the Gulf, since called San Andreas, about 1/4 of a mile above where the town now stands, and commenced working in the bed of the gulch by sinking holes and washing out with, what is that? Battens? Battens? Okay. In the fall of 49, their numbers considerably increased, but the place was not looked upon as worthy of any great note as a mining locality. But in the winter of 1849 or spring of 50, a few Americans came in and commenced operations in the main gulch. Blah 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 blah. Okay, where do we get to the point where we talk about Joaquin? Huh? Okay, maybe this is it. In March or April of this year, a Mexican was killed while asleep in Hardin's house. The murder was supposed to have been committed by another Mexican who was sleeping in the same building. He was arrested, tried, and acquitted, but when leaving town was overtaken and executed by the populace. He was buried on the summit of the hill south of town. In June 1858, the water failing in this vicinity, many of the miners left and located on the rivers and in the neighboring camps during the summer months. In the fall, they all returned, and the camp again became life, bluster, and activity. In the winter of 1852, the whole community in this vicinity was kept in a constant agitation and alarm caused by the depredations and murders of the notorious bandit Joaquin and his band of murderers, who had established their headquarters at Yaqui Camp, about 3 miles from this place, whence they issued forth to levy contributions upon the unsuspecting traveler on the highway and the quiet and peaceable miner in his cabin, and the harmless John Chinaman, wherever he was found. For some time, robberies were committed in different parts of the country, and no one appeared to be aware whence the blow came or where they should strike in order to put a stop to the depredations that were being almost daily committed. Frequent meetings of the citizens were held to devise means for ridding the country of this band of cutthroats who were striking terror into the hearts of all of our citizens. Numbers of persons formed themselves into volunteer companies, and parties were scouring the hills in all directions. The bandit's place of rendezvous, Yake Camp, was broken up. He and his followers were pursued for several days among the hills in this vicinity, and in the pursuit of the officers and the officers and several citizens of San Andreas particularly distinguished themselves in the ardor and zeal which they followed upon the footsteps of those marauding pests of the country, and never slacked in their extortions until they were driven from the confines of our country or county, never more to return. Many of the Spanish-American race were believed to be privy to the action and whereabouts of Joaquin during his stay in this vicinity. Accordingly, notices were posted in different places, warning that all race of people to quit the township in 3 days. Many left, but some who were able to prove their good character by Americans were permitted to remain, and after this excitement had somewhat abated, many of those who had left returned unmolested. Early in the following spring, a Mexican was arrested in this town who was suspected of being one of Joaquin's gang, and on examination, a gunshot wound partly healed was found on his body, which circumstance, together with the testimony of some of the citizens, was considered conclusive evidence of his guilt. He was tried, convicted, and executed by the people. This ended the excitement concerning Joaquin and his party in this vicinity, and we believe in the county. Okay, so that's it. So for that one, that's pretty interesting. Okay, I like that. We'll learn some more stuff. How about over here? The Shasta Courier. What do they have to say? Captain Harry Love, the destroyer of the famous bandit Joaquin, turned Benedict just before his departure for the Atlantic States. He weakened to the charms of Mrs. Mary Bennett of Santa Clara. Poor fellow, we only hope that some fine day he might not find himself discussing the wisdom of the remark of the elder Weller to his son, beware of bitters. Oh yeah, that was boring. Okay, whatever. Interesting. Not. Okay, so here we got the Chico Weekly Chronicle Record. What do they have to say? Adventures with Joaquin the Mountain Bandit. Oh, this one's long. Goodness gracious. Okay. Wow. This is quite the article here. Okay. Might learn something interesting. Okay, so this is The Adventures with Joaquin the Mountain Bandit by John H. Fitzgerald. In the spring of 1850, I left the Salinas Plains with a herd of cattle that I had purchased from the Bernardo Murphy, and while en route for the southern mines, we encamped for a night at the mission of San Jose, where myself and companions were joined by a company of Mexicans, consisting of a padre, the patron or owner, his wife and his wife's sister, and 4 persons, or slaves, making in all 8 persons of their company. Our party consisted of 2 partners and myself, besides a vaquero. The padre was a tall, sallow-faced individual, but withal as jovial a fellow, and as free to taste the contents of the Cantina Colorado as any in the company. And in And then his face would assume such comical expression that one was loth to believe that he ever kept Lent. He was dressed in the goodness gracious, in the canoxials? He was dressed in the canossials of a Capuchin friar. He rode up in a dun-colored mule and sat sideways up on the animal in the saddle covered with a heavy Spanish machilla, and bridle were decorated with small silver bells which kept up a jingling that was rather pleasant and broke the quiet monotony of a hot day's ride, while rosary beads and cross swung back and forth upon his side as his mule ambled along at an easy, goodness gracious, roking pace. After indulging in an extra draught at the canteen, he would throw back his hood, exposing the top of his shaven cranium to the hot sun's rays, and the peons would cross themselves at what they considered his religious devotion, while he chanted in Latin what sounded more like a bacchanalian song than the litany of the church, for when Ecce signum esto perpetua escaped from his lips in a merry musical tone of voice, he would raise a splendidly wrought canteen from under his cloak and apply it to his lips, and after a hearty draught would add Anita Minerva, and his small dark gray eyes would twinkle with humorous light, as much as to say, we know what is good, don't we? Okay, I don't understand. Is this real? Is this a real story? I don't think this is a real story. I think this is fiction. Yes, that's my text notification sound. Banjos. Oh, yeah. Okay, what do we got here? Rose from sir, he wore and wiped the sweat from his brow as if the recital of Joaquin's wrongs had agonized him. I also rose to my feet, saying, as I did so, poor Joaquin, how I pity him. Yes, pity Joaquin, Don, but as long as Joaquin can remember you and doctors. Okay, this is not real. This is fake. This is a story. Okay. Okay. What do we got? Placer Herald? What do they have to say? Okay. Still more important, captured and beheaded, and okay, let's make this a little bigger. Still more important, Joaquin captured and beheaded, and his body in the hands of his captors. It has been reported here that the company of Rangers under Captain Henry Love met with the notorious murderer and robber Joaquin and 6 of his equally famous band at Pachia Pass, and after a desperate running fight with Joaquin and one of his gang, was killed and one taken prisoner. 3 managed to make their escape, but none of them had his horse killed and several captured. Captain Love is on his way down with the head of Joaquin preserved in spirits. None of Love's Rangers were seriously injured. The Rangers during the engagement were commanded by Captain Burns, Love not being present, and the other one killed known by the name of Three-Fingered Jack. The Stockton Journal remarks as follows in relation to the above. It is remotely intimated that the reported capture and decapitation of the bandit Joaquin may be a humbug. Without endorsing the rumor, we may be allowed to say that the trophy is slow in the making of its appearance. Perhaps some hombre who had the misfortune to be born Mexican had lost his head. But strange doubts have arisen to the identity of the one now on the way to the capital. As an item of interest, we may notice a suspicion that is gradually obtaining converts to the effect that the man Dawson, who was shot near this place, was no less a person than the far-famed outlaw, whose deeds at one time filled the county with alarm. Many believe that Joaquin was a myth, and that the monstrous crimes charged upon him were the work of a confederation of rascals. If Dawson's story was true, that he was associated with a large band of men equally desperate as himself, we can credit the suspicion very easily. Okay. Makes you think. What else we got? Placer Herald again. What do we got here? Okay, here we go. The Republican learns of the following additional particulars. Mr. V.M. Payton and a gentleman who had just arrived from Rich Gulch informs us that the camp attacked as described above. There were 200 Chinamen and that every one of them was robbed of his dust, and that Joaquin's spoils must have amounted to $50 or 50. That is a 5, right? Is that a 5 or a 3? I think that's a 3. $30,000. Dang. Quite a lot of money. Friday night, 12 o'clock, Brown's Express had just arrived from the Calaveras. Mr. Brown informs us that 4 Chinamen were murdered near Foreman's Ranch yesterday. The bandit Joaquin was formerly principal Vaquero for Dr. Marsh, and gentleman who knows him well says that he must be aided by some white men in his nefarious proceedings, that he is a poor, miserable, cowardly Mexican. Nothing has been heard yet from the company who left this place on Friday to pursue the robbers. Okay. Interesting. What else we got? That's the same one. Okay, Placer Herald again. Placer Herald's one of my favorite newspapers. They did a good job. Okay, what do we got here? Still more important. Oh, we already read that. Okay. A lot of duplicates here. The Weekly Butte Democrat. What's this? What do we got here? What's the title on this? Okay. Let's go back up here. Where's the highlights here? No man has ever lived in California has been execrated more than Bully Waterman, who's not even the band. Okay, whatever. Okay, that's just some political thing. All right, what else we got? Placer Herald again. When is a wall like a fish? When it is scaled. Ha 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 ha. Joaquin and his gang, Governor Bigler offers a reward of $1,000 for the apprehension of the bandit Joaquin. So this is pretty interesting. In one of the articles that I read, I want to say it was actually by William Merrow, that the guy I was telling you about. I swear, and I'm not going to say that it was because I don't know. I don't have that article up right here. But I swear I read in some article that there was never any sort of reward for Joaquin. But the majority of people say that there was a $1,000 reward. There's a story about how at one point he goes into I don't remember the name, maybe it's like $5,000, I think it was. So there's a sign somewhere on a wall, and it's like a wanted poster or whatever, right? And it says the wanted head of Joaquin, blah, 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 $5,000. And Joaquin apparently wrote on it, "I'll give you 10,000, love Joaquin," or something like that. And that is supposedly false. I have not seen anything yet that can corroborate that to be true. But this right here, this tells me that there actually was at least a $1,000 reward for the apprehension of the bandit, not his head, but the apprehension of Joaquin. So that's good. That's good. I like that. I'm glad that we were able to find that. Thank you, Placer Herald. What do we got here? Columbia Gazette. Captain Harry Love, destroyer of the famous bandit Joaquin turned Benedict. Okay, we already read that. That's just a different newspaper. What do we got here? Red Bluff Beacon. The Captain Ledger gives a detailed account of a cave recently discovered and located near the town of Jackson. It is 90 by 70 feet in area and 20 feet high. It is supposed to be one of the hiding places of the bandit Joaquin, who cursed California with his presence in the early days. This was written in 1861, so he was dead by then. I think he died in 1854 or 1853. I can't remember which one. Pretty cool. Cave. I love caves. Caves are fun. Okay. Daily National Democrat. What's this got to say? Okay. The National learned that the notorious vagabond and murderer named Salvador Flores, one of the gang of the bandit Joaquin Murrieta, has been captured in Arizona. He had committed a murder in Tubay, and a trap was laid for his capture, which succeeded. There you go. There you go. The Placer Herald, what do we got here? Head of Joaquin. Oh, here we go. Okay. Head of Joaquin, Captain Harry Love, arrived in town yesterday from Mariposa, bringing with him the trunkless head of the bandit chief Joaquin. The trophy will be ready for exhibition on, we believe, today, as it is now in the process of preparation. That's pretty cool. Pretty cool. We don't have anything cool like that, you know. The head of, you know, some murder. What do we got here? Head of Joaquin. Okay, we already read that one. What do we got next? Shasta Courier. What did they got to say? Okay, Pictorial Union. We are indebted to Mr. Roman of the Shasta Block Store for a copy of the third number of the Pictorial Union. This number has been gotten. This is gotten with a great deal. Okay, it contains 25 engravings, including, it is said, a fine likeness of the notorious bandit chieftain Joaquin. Okay. Cool. Okay, what do we got? Sonoma County Journal. John Rollin Ridge, Yellowbird, the author of The Life and Adventures of Joaquin Murrieta, the California Bandit, is now preparing for a third edition to be enlarged and improved for a publication. It is estimated that at least 1 million of... Oh, okay. Well, let's just read this since we already started. It is estimated that at least 1 million of rats met an untimely death at Sacramento during the late freshet. Freshet. What's a freshet? Okay. I went to public school, so I don't know what a freshet is. Freshet. A flood of a river from heavy rain or melted snow. There you go. Okay, interesting. San Andreas Independent. What do we got here? Capture of Tom Bell. Okay. So Tom Bell is some other guy. Maybe we'll do a podcast about Sam Bell sometime. How about that? Okay. Plaza Herald. What do we got here? News of the state. The Alta says that citizens of Los Angeles have a curious story among them that the capture and decapitation of Joaquin Murrieta did not take place on the person of the bandit. It is stated that the portion of Joaquin's gang alleged to be surprised and routed was none other than the party of native Californians and Sonorans who had gone to the Tulare County for the express and avowed purpose of running Mustangs. 3 of the party, our correspondent states, have returned to Los Angeles and report that they were attacked by a party of Americans and that the balance of their party, 4 in number, had been killed. That Joaquin Valenzuela, one of the party, was killed and his head cut off by his captors. Okay. So there's quite a bit here that's saying that it probably wasn't even Joaquin. that they cut the head off, which wouldn't surprise me. If there's $1,000 on the line, just kill some guy. Say it's that's Joaquin. Yeah, thanks. Give me some money. Wouldn't be surprised. Wouldn't be surprised. Wouldn't be surprised. What do we got here? This is the same thing I already read. I already clicked that. What do we got here? Next, down here, Nevada Journal of 53. A friend whose judgment we place great reliance says that a Mexican informed him that two Sonorans, whom he recognized as dangerous characters, having known them in the state of Sonora, were prowling in the vicinity of the city on Monday evening. He thinks it is probable that they belong to Joaquin's band and that they have gone in the direction of San Jose, so look out below. No, what is this? Part of the thing about doing research in newspapers is just the random things you find while you're looking for something else. Like this. This is a poem. So let's read it. The seasons of life. Life is like the passing year. Budding hopes with spring appear. Urging on the sultry hours. Summer moon brings wealth of flowers. Autumn's afternoon is rife with the golden grain of life. Frosty age in twilight dim, trembling hears the vesper hymn. Ere the bell has ceased to toll, heaven will claim another soul. Hope and death have passed away. Winter, death, secures his prey. All right. What else we got? Placer Herald. Okay, that's the same thing. All right, cool. Nevada Journal. Okay, get that out of the way. What do we got here? This is a decently long one. The following startlingly news we take from the correspondence of the Union of the 15th. It shows an awful state of things in the southern mines. By the Calaveras Chronicle, we learn that one of Joaquin's band has been taken and executed. 7 men murdered. Robberies, great excitement. Jackson, February 13th, 1853. Our town and this immediate vicinity has today been the scene of some of the most cold-blooded murders and daring robberies that have ever been chronicled, even in California. A portion of the band of the celebrated robber, Joaquin, has been lurking in this vicinity for the last week. At the big bar of the Consumas, on Tuesday last, they robbed and murdered a number of Chinamen and were pursued to this place. On Thursday night, they stole 3 fine horses here, and though large parties were out in search of them, they could not be discovered. They left 3 broken down horses in their stead, which had been stolen on the other side of the river. This forenoon, a number of Chinamen came into town, stating that the Mexican bandits had robbed them. And shortly after, more Chinamen came in from another camp stating that they also had been robbed and 1 Chinaman killed from the same party. All of our citizens who could procure horses immediately started in pursuit and hardly left town when news arrived from a 3rd Chinese encampment that they also been robbed by the same party and 2 of their numbers killed. The party of Americans who started in pursuit of at Cook's found at Cook's Gulch in Sutter Creek the dead body of a Chinaman. They traced the robbers to Jackson Creek, a few miles below this village, and there found more of their work. 1 Chinaman mortally wounded, and the body of Mr. Joseph Lake, a respectable citizen of the town. Mr. Lake was living but speechless and died in a... Gotta love Canon. They stopped recording. So I don't know when it stopped recording. I was reading the Nevada Journal thing about the Chinaman wounded, and it's a long article, but basically It says that we just received news that the Stockton stage to McComley Hill was stopped last night by Joaquin himself and a part of his band, and that the driver and 2 passengers were murdered and the stage horses stolen. $1,000 were offered for the head of Joaquin. Another thing, $1,000. So now we have 2 corroborating sources, who has thus far been singularly successful, both in his daring robberies and his fair breath escaped. His party is supposed to consist of over 50. So I've heard 15, I've heard 20. No, this is the first time I've heard 50. So that's interesting. 50 scattered all over different parts of the country. By tomorrow, I hope to be able to inform you of the capture and proper punishment of at least a portion of his gang. So, yeah, there's that. What else we got? The Nevada Democrat. Hey, this one's just abandoned. It doesn't say Joaquin Murrieta. Okay. Dump this out on the wall. Shasta Courier. What does this got to say? Okay. The bandit camp in those retreats as the rendezvous escaped convicts and white-faced murderers, that they might remain in undisturbed for 10 years as the traveler never ventures so far from the settlements. Hundreds of pleasant valleys lie in the mountain region, watered by never-failing springs. The grass grows luxuriantly. Never heard that before. Luxuriantly. The timber is plentiful, and the gang to be found in the wilds furnishes an abundance of food for the guerrillas. Okay. Harry Love says that Joaquin could have raised 2,000 desperados. 2,000? So we went from like 9 or so to 15 to 50. And now 2,000. Okay, 2,000. And believes that such was that bandit's purpose, to scour the whole country, sack the small settlements, and before a body of troops could be raised, announce himself at Sonora. Okay. The prisoner he took intimated as much to Captain Love. There can be no doubt that this wild region will, for years to come, unless some effective measures are taken, offer an asylum for the offcasts of society. Thus, we think it would be desirable for the rangers to be kept in the field. Harry Love knows the men who are leaders of the brigades, is probably one of the only men acquainted with their haunts. His companions know not what fear is, have proved their worth, and merit the praise of all. This is a subject that will recommend itself to every citizen who has the interest of the state at heart. Okay. Okay, the Nevada Journal. I don't think this is... that's what that... Whoop-de-doo. For treasurer, Samuel Knight. Yay, Samuel Knight for treasurer. Whoop-de-doo. Okay. What do we got here? Georgetown News. Okay. Joaquin's head. The capture of this renowned bandit chief, says the San Francisco Citizen, after having been carted about the state and exhibited in the mining camps and towns, has at last found a resting place in the window of Natchez Shooting Gallery. Okay. On Clay Street, opposite the plaza. Joaquin was for many months the terror of counties Amador, Calaveras, Tuolumne, and the vicinity, and although many have doubted the identity of the head captured by Harry Love, certain it is he has not been heard of since, and his depredations ceased from that date. There can be no reasonable doubt that this head was once firmly fixed on the shoulders of Joaquin, and was, W-O-S, was, the origin of many terrible deeds. John Chinaman seemed especially the object of... It's funny that whenever they're talking about Chinese people, the John Chinaman, it's like John Doe, but it's John Chinaman instead. Okay, John Chinaman seemed especially the object of the depredations You know why? So the reason why is because Americans believe in the Second Amendment, and the Chinese never seemed to ever have any guns, so they were easier targets. And the number that that he slaughtered almost surpasses belief. In the language of Pike, he has gone under. Okay, and while his bones are bleaching in mountains of the Coast Range, his harmless features, preserved in good spirits, are the object of curious starers to gaze at and speculate upon its history. Okay. That was interesting. That was a good one. I'm glad we found that one. All right. Sacramento Bee. Shout out to Sacramento Bee. Not a worthwhile thing to read nowadays. Rain in San Joaquin. Okay. Whoop-de-doo. That was a waste. Waste of my time. Sacramento Age. What do we got here? Okay. Joaquin. Mr. Lee of Lee and Marshall's Circus Company, who is, by the way, one of the best men and accomplished artists in his profession, informed us yesterday of a fact we have never yet seen published, and yet, which is an item in California history and should not go unchronicled. Joaquin's band paid him a visit one night during his performance in the Southern Mines, and while he was in the ring, stole 10 of his trained horses from under a shed adjoining his tent. On being informed of this fact, scarcely 5 minutes afterwards, while he was performing, he left the audience, mounted his men, armed and in circus costume tights, and started the chase. Not only overtook and routed the bandits, but recovered all of his animals. That's awesome. That's good. Can you imagine that? Imagine just seeing that. You're out on your porch, smoking a cigar or something. Huh. What's that? Okay. Interesting. Okay, cool. That's cool. I like that. All right. What else we got? San Andreas Independent. Another daring robbery. We are again called upon to chronicle another daring robbery and outrage penetrated by 3 Mexicans. Now it's gone down to 3. 3 that committed the robberies on the Chinese, the particulars of which were given in our last 2 papers. They are bold, intrepid, and daring, and unless some hasty steps are taken to rid the community of their presence, we may expect to hear of murders and other acts of violence similar to those committed by Joaquin. We are indebted to Deputy Sheriff Schroebel for the following. On last Friday night, 3 Mexicans robbed a trading depot kept by a Mexican and his wife on Dry Creek, 1.5 miles from Foreman's. They stole over $800, 33 ounces of which was gold dust. The villains made a clean sweep of everything that was valuable, even to forcing the rings off the old woman's fingers. They had their faces blackened and were otherwise disguised and made their appearance on foot, no doubt having horses concealed nearby, as in a very short time they had gone beyond the reach of pursuit. During the ransacking of the store, one of the robbers asked the woman if she knew him. She replied, "No." "It is well for you," said he, "or we would kill both of you. We would do it anyhow if you were not countrymen of ours." Okay. It is to be deplored that bands of idle Mexicans are allowed to hang around our mining camps and towns with no apparent means of earning a livelihood, invariably stealing or committing other offenses against the peace and welfare of society, whenever they can do so without apparent safety. When arrested on suspicion, it is almost impossible to convict them, as they will not inform or bear witness against each other, suffering even death with stoic indifference rather than breathe a word that would lead to the detection of their comrades in crime. There ain't no snitching here. This country of in this county and Amador, has always been infested with the worst and lowest class of greasers to be found in the state. Since long before Joaquin established his headquarters. What? I love when they don't. Headquarters at Yaqui Camp. The circumstances of Joaquin's life and acts are well known to all of them, many of whom were friendly aides and companions of the robber chief and still retain a desire to emulate his career. 3 robbers, blah, blah, blah. Okay. One of the robbers caught, Jose Lopez of Campo Nueva, the Mexican owning the store that was robbed, pursued the thieves to Robinson's Ferry on the Stanislaus, where he succeeded in arresting one, Lorenzo, a Mexican who was identified by the robbed man and wife as one of the bandits. No money was found in his possession. The thief, Lorenzo, was sent to the county jail to stand trial next court. Okay. San Andreas Independent. Okay, that one just says bandit, so you don't know if that's Joaquin or not. That one's nothing. That's nothing. That's nothing. That's nothing. That's nothing. Okay, what's this? Sacramento Age. Increase of crime. Okay, what is it? Love, who led the party who captured Joaquin, informed us that while on search of this bandit chief, he came across large parties of both Americans and Mexicans in the valleys of the Coast Range who pretended to be catching wild horses in the San Joaquin Valley, but in whose corrals be found numerous stolen animals. Yeah. Okay. Well, nowadays it's just stolen cars, but what do we got? Procuring along. So weird. Instead of a long, it's a long. Procuring a long knife, he went directly up to the bandit, challenged him with his intention, and before he could use his pistol, plunged his knife through him. Mexican delivered himself up to the judge Telefonero, who, on hearing satisfactory evidence to... Okay. That was nothing. Oh, is this Pancho Villa? Is that... No. Oh, Pancho Daniels. Okay. I just wanted to see if it was Pancho Villa. Let's see. Okay, we already saw that. So after the first 10 or so articles, a lot of the times it's not that interesting. A lot of times it's the repeats of the same junk. Then you got to just change the way you do the research, what you're looking for, and so on. Because a lot of times, for example, there's the 5 Joaquin idea, where there was 5 different Joaquins, each one having a different name. I can't remember. I couldn't tell you the different names of them, but one of them was Murrieta. But anyway. So it's possible that, they're looking for Joaquin this, Joaquin that, Joaquin that. So that's why even if it just says Joaquin, I'll still look at it. But for the most part, it's just talking about San Joaquin Valley or San Joaquin this, San Joaquin. Okay. This one just says ranch, bandit, poor Joaquin. Okay, what's this? Shasta Courier. Let's see. We understand that Messrs. Lion and Plume, who purchased Joaquin's head and three-fingered Jack's hand at sheriff's sale for $36. Okay. You know what? I want to buy someone's head for $36. Don't you? Joaquin. Okay. So Messrs. Lion and Plume, who purchased Joaquin's head and three-fingered Jack's hand at sheriff's sale for $36 yesterday, sold the head to Natchez for $100. It's a pretty good investment, okay. And literally threw the hand. And it's okay. So if you buy the head, I'll give you a hand. Okay. Who sold Okay, who sold a great many revolvers in the lifetime of the bandit intended for his destruction. Designs placing the relic in a shop window as proper a depository, perhaps as could be found. Poor Joaquin. He little dreamed his head would come to this. Okay, that's pretty funny. Interesting. San Joaquin. Abandoned. San Joaquin, abandoned. Okay, this one says Bandit Joaquin. Sacramento age. Periodical rascality. It would almost seem that crime, like a certain diseases, was periodical and epidemic. The country has recently been and yet is afflicted with this moral disease in the way of highway robbery. So it was 2 years ago, and the malady. I always say malady. The malady raged to an alarming extent, terminating for the time in the death of the bandit Joaquin and the dispersion of his confederates. Just now it is... Okay, so that's all it was. Whoop-de-doo. Okay. Cool story. Joaquin Jim. Okay. Joaquin. Okay, I think we might be done reading. Yeah. So I think we found everything that we can find so far. We've corroborated some sources and made some interesting discoveries. Now, so I want to look into Three Fingered Jack. So I want to learn more about him. So what I do know about Three Fingered Jack is Three Fingered Jack was shot in the hand and lost his fingers. So now he only has 3 fingers on one of his hands. And he was basically the right hand man of Joaquin. So let's learn more about him, see what there is about him, and see what other things we can learn about through learning about him. So I already put it in. Keyword, same exact thing as everything before, 1850 to 1865. Keyword Three Fingered Jack. Let's look at the Shasta Courier. So this one's quite a decent read. Okay. Three Fingered Jack. The editors of the Stockton Journal does not doubt the correctness of the report of Joaquin's capture, though he has no further particulars than were furnished on our readers. The robber who is reported to have been slain in company of Joaquin is undoubtedly the same fellow to whom we alluded yesterday. The barbarities which Three Fingered Jack with his companions committed at the early period in the history of American affairs in California, which were mentioned incidentally in our notice of the rascal yesterday, were inflicted upon 2 Americans, a Mr. T. Cowie and Fowler. The account of their murder was published in the local papers of this place in 1846. It is substantially as follows. 2 or 3 days after the town of Sonoma was taken by the Bear Flag Party and the proclamation issued by W.M.B. Ide, the 2 young men above named started to go from their homes near Sonoma to Bodega. On their way, not far from Petaluma Creek, they encountered a party of native Californians, all armed, by whom they were taken prisoners. They were kept guarded until next morning. Then a council was held to determine their fate. A swarthy New Mexican named Padilla and a Californian named Three Fingered Jack was most active in denouncing the prisoners as only deserving of death, and their counsel prevailed. The unfortunate young men were stripped, bound to a Okay, so the unfortunate young men were stripped, bound to a tree with the lariats of their captors, and for a while the inhuman wretches practiced knife throwing at their naked limbs. And in the manner that savages are said to torture their victims at the stake, the experiments by their tomahawks. The men prayed to be shot. The fiends then commenced stoning their victims. One stone broke the jaw of Fowler. A miscreant advanced, thrust the end of his riata through the mouth, cut an incision in the throat, and made a tie by which the jaw was dragged out. The perpetrator of this horrible cruelty was Jack. Cowie, who had fainted, had the skin stripped from his arms and shoulders. Both men were now slowly dispatched with knives. Nothing can exceed the sufferings and the slow torture to which they were subjected. Pieces of flesh were taken from their bodies and crammed into their mouths. They were eventually destroyed by cutting out their bowels. It is some degree mitigates the painful emotion with which these deeds were contemplated to know that vengeance was sure and swift on most of the murderers. A party of bear hunters rode out of Sonoma and fell upon the company commanded by De La Torre, which the murderers had joined. Although 3 times their number, the hunters rushed upon them with rifles and knives. 8 were slain and several wounded. Three-Fingered Jack was taken prisoner afterwards, but managed to make his escape. He was at last, we hope, paid for the forfeit of his villainous deeds in California. Wow. Okay. You don't read stuff like that in the newspaper today. Dang. Okay, the Placer Herald. We already read this, didn't we? Yeah, I think we read this one when we were looking at other stuff. Let's see, what's this? Three-Fingered Jack says the Wilmington Journal, 18th inst. A well-known California desperado and 4 other steamboat men recently left Fort Yuma for Guaymas in a boat. When about 600 miles away from any inhabitants, the occasion to land. As soon as Jack's companions were on shore, Jack shot one dead and wounded another. The other 2 fled. Three-Fingered Jack left Sacramento some months since in the capacity of second engineer and steamer. Okay. Interesting. Lots of death here. Daily California Express. Assault and battery. A man styled Three-Fingered Jack assaulted a man by the name of Davis, proprietor of the Miners Restaurant, yesterday morning at C Street near the Little Place. Three-Fingered Jack made some very serious charges against Davis's wife when Davis, gave him the lie, and then Jack assaulted him over the head with a billet of wood, cutting him very badly. Clotted blood and hair was plainly seen on the chunk of wood. Jack was arrested by Marshal Barkley. A large crowd, of course, assembled to see the fun, as they termed it. So he's been arrested quite a few times, but just kept getting out. Catch and release. Let's see. Okay, that's the same thing we read before. Sonoma County Journal. So is this one big giant thing or something? I like to find where it starts, but she noticed during this particular ceremony that one of them had but 3 fingers. Alone in the despoiled room, Adelaide, faint and exhausted, waited the first gleam of daylight. Then, as the robbers did not return, she stole up to her room undressed and fell into a disturbed slumber. The something. Of the family next morning may be imagined, and the Adelaide story was still more astounding than that of the robbery itself. London police were sent. London police? What? What? Okay, there must be more than just one three-fingered Jack. Maybe that's Jack the Ripper. I don't know. Placer Herald. What do we got here? Oh, see, okay, so we didn't read this part, but I did mention Three-Fingered Jack, the lieutenant and right-hand man of Joaquin. There is no doubt that the identity of Joaquin, many have recognized him in numerous affidavits in the possession of Mercer's H&M, declaring it to be the head of the desperado, leaves no doubt that the veritable Joaquin has paid the penalty for his misdeeds. Captain Love's Rangers have done the state good service in ridding of a bad man. We only regret that the term of service should have expired before they could have rooted out the whole of his miserable banditti. So there's quite a difference. You know, some people say that that's not the head. Some people say that it is the head. You know, what's the truth? I don't know. I think there's some people say that his sister saw the head and was like, that ain't him. So that's nothing. Weekly Trinity Journal. Three-Fingered Jack has been retaken and sent to San Quentin. What? So if he was, this is so confusing. So if he was dead, maybe it's not dead. Maybe they just cut off his hand. How would they cut off his hand but then let him be released? That doesn't make any sense. I don't understand that. This makes no sense. I'm confused. Okay, this one says Three-Fingered Jack, something about Ireland. What? John McDowell, alias Three-Fingered Jack, was a native of the north of Ireland. He came from there to New York and went to Mexico during the war between the country and the United States. In 1849, he came to California and resided for some time in Tuolumne County. He came from Virginia City to this place about a month since, and so far as we could learn, followed gambling for a living. He was a man about 35 years old and over 5 feet high, a slender build. Okay, so the victims at Aurora. Concerning the men lately hung by a mob in Aurora, the Aurora Times gives the following account. John Daly, William Buckley, and Masterson, we learn, were the natives of New York. Daly came to California at quite an early day, yada, 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 whoop-de-doo, doodly-doodly-diddly-doo. Young man, dun-dun-dun, you must consider him one of the most brutal fiends that ever lived, human shape. It was that Johnson. Okay, what does that have to do? What does that have to do with? Okay, whatever. The Rangers during the engagement were commanded by Captain Burns. Love not being present. Oh, we already read that. Okay. Chico Weekly Record. This is 1865. Okay, so now this one says L.W. Thomas, alias Three-Fingered Jack, was a loudmouthed rebel sympathizer and was arrested by some members of Captain Daughtry Alcatraz. Okay, so there's more than just one Three-Fingered Jack. Chico Weekly, this is 57. Garcio is three-fingered Jack. A perfect demon. Human blood to him is like wine to a drunkard. If Joaquin's banned in the neighborhood, my God, all we can do is sell our lives as dearly as possible. Why is Joaquin such a terror? Is this a story? This is a story. Oh, that's the Adventures with Joaquin story that I was reading earlier that I just gave up on reading. Okay. Capture of Joaquin official report. Okay, official report. How about that? First Lieutenant Connor of the Rangers arrived in Stockton this evening for the purpose of procuring the necessary material for the effectual preservation of the head of Joaquin and hand of Three-Fingered Jack. We are indebted to the Lieutenant Connor for a minute and official report of the capture, made by Captain Love, from which we can make the extracts annexed. The prisoner has confessed that Joaquin, when attacked, was on the road from San Diego to the mines with the intention of making one more foray upon the Chinese and Americans and then returning to Sonora. The report that at the time of the capture, Captain Burns commanded the Rangers is incorrect. They were commanded by Captain Love in person. So this is the official report that Captain Love was, in fact, the guy in charge of this. Earlier, there was reports that if you remember, we read that this other guy, what was his name? Burns. Burns was in charge, but this one says, and this is the official report, so I guess the official report is more accurate. I don't know. Captain Harry Love reports that on the 25th of July, he encountered the notorious robber of Joaquin Murrieta with his band on the Arroyo Contuga near the coast range of mountains on the Tulare Plains. When he discovered Joaquin, he was encamped in the above river and appeared to have made some hard marches previously, judging from the jaded appearance of their horses. On being pursued by some of the company, Joaquin was immediately recognized, and as being aware of the fact, immediately sprang to his horse and endeavored to escape. He was closely pursued by some of the company, and his horse shot from under him when he took to flight on foot, and being wounded by some of the men, shot him dead before he had gone far. In the meantime, others and the company were pursuing the remaining part of the band, who fought bravely while retreating, each being armed with 2 six-shooters. 3 of their number were killed and 2 made prisoners, while the remainder escaped. Immediately after returning from the pursuit, Joaquin and one of his principal men were beheaded, and Captain Burns and Janot? I don't know what that is. Sylvester were dispatched to Fort Miller, being the nearest point, with the heads in order to be put in spirits for preservation. Okay, so they went to Fort Miller to then put their heads in. Okay. The head of Joaquin Lieutenant was spoiled. Oh. So that's why. So so the way I read it is that they shot Three-Fingered Jack in the face, and so his head wasn't pretty enough to put in a jar. So they put his hand in instead, and that's why they used the hand. And I always thought that was a better identifier because he only had 3 fingers. But I guess they originally wanted to do his head as well. There is not the least doubt that the head now in Captain Love's possession is that of the noted Joaquin Murrieta, the chief and leader of the murderers and robbers of the Calaveras, Mariposa, and other sections of the state. The prisoner now in jail in Mariposa acknowledged such to be the fact. Interesting. Sacramento Bee, 1860. Oh, this is the London thing again. That's as far as we're going to go with the research today. I think we learned quite a bit and confirmed some things and so on and so forth. I still have to read those 2 books that I mentioned in the beginning of this video. And then I'll be officially done with my research. I'll compile it all together and come up with a great story to tell you guys for the podcast. So I'm going to get working on that now. And I hope you guys enjoyed this. I think this was fun. I like taking you guys along with me and doing the research. I had fun, and I hope you guys did too. So yeah, look forward to the podcast coming up soon, and I'll see you then. Bye.